Okay, so welcome everyone who's joined, and a very warm welcome. So my name is Holly and I'm a human capital manager at Deloitte, and I'm going to be your MC for today. So I work on our workforce transformation team. So we help clients on a whole range of people issues, from strategic workforce transformation to employee experience to talent, and most notably to diversity, equity and inclusion solutions. So on behalf of Deloitte, I'm delighted to introduce you to today's session, which we are so proud to be sponsoring. We've got a very interesting topic for you all today, in addition to a really strong panel. So I do hope that you enjoy. We are going to be discussing the topic of giving simple tips for attracting a diverse workforce and cultivating psychological safety in the workplace. Now, when we talk about diversity, it's really important to have a holistic understanding and definition as to what it was. And really, we can categorize it into these two buckets, right? You have your inherent diversity, and these are traits that you are born with. So things like ethnicity, things like sexual orientation. And then you have your acquired diversity traits. And these are things that you acquire or, learn over time, things like languages, things like religion. Now, within these two buckets, you have your visible characteristics, of which you can tell within the first 10 seconds of meeting someone. But you then also have your underlying, often hidden characteristics, really which make up the bones of who somebody is. Now, I like to visualize it as an iceberg. So the tip is what you can see, but the remaining 80–90% of the iceberg really is who that person is. So when listening into this panel discussion and topic, really important to have that holistic definition and understanding as to diversity, looking at that entire iceberg. When we talk about psychological safety, really what we mean here is inclusion. I think at its height, psychological safety is having the confidence to speak up. It's feeling inspired to speak up without fear of, embarrassment or judgment in the workplace. So that's in a nutshell what we're going to be discussing today. But enough from my side. I might invite the panel now to introduce themselves. Paddy, we might start with yourself.
Great stuff. Thanks, Holly, and thanks very much for the invite to attend the webinar today. So my name is Paddy O'Connell. I'm part of the senior leadership team here in Star Circle. So Star Circle is an organisation that supports organisation in the identification of passive talent, and we work with a lot of organisations on a global basis, working with them on their various diversity goals as well, and supporting their D&I strategies. So I've spent, I suppose, the best part of my career, over 20 years, working within recruitment and talent management. And I suppose I've supported many organizations in their D&I goals, and have advised them in certain respects in the maybe small, simple tips that they could do, from, everything from job specifications to how they manage their outreach programs to ensure that they actually meet their own D&I goals.
Brilliant. Thanks, Paddy, and it's great to have you. Brian, we might jump to you next.
Absolutely. Thanks, Holly. Afternoon, everyone. My name is Roy McSweeney. I'm a 25-year-old man, I suppose, born and raised in Cork. I graduated UCC in 2020, so I was one of the first kind of out of the COVID group. I'm currently working in VMware, so I've been here about 2.5 years, and I'm a graduate deal analyst in the deal management team, which is the finance kind of wing of VMware. So I'm in no way, I suppose, a HR specialist, will say, but what I am, I suppose, is an expert in my own life, and what I hope to add to this panel is kind of my personal experience. So for those of you that don't know, which I assume is the majority, I have a history of mental health issues. When I was 16, I was diagnosed with anorexia, and that kind of developed into bulimia, depression, anxiety, you name it. I was basically playing, mental health bingo for a while, and almost won. So that had a massive impact on my school life, college life, work life, and my life, I guess. So it kind of touched every single element, and I think I've got some valuable enough insight that companies can use, hopefully, to kind of benefit yourselves in a kind of Disability and wellness diversity lens. Since I started in VMware, I got involved in VM Inclusion Ireland, which is our internal committee to kind of support inclusion diversity. And I'm the lead of the disability and wellness pillar. So still doing some work on the side now as well. I think I've kind of adapted a mindset of I don't want to go through what I went through and not benefit other people. So that's why I'm here today as well. And just before I pass it on, I wanted to say if there are any questions at all, don't be afraid to ask them. I'm an open book. I've like speaking about myself for maybe a little bit too much sometimes. So if there's anything you want to know about me or my struggles and how that might relate to the workplace, by all means ask in the Q&A and be happy to answer. But that's all from me. Thank you.
Thanks, Ryan, especially for being so open and transparent. I think having your perspective is going to be really impactful on this conversation. And Aideen.
Thanks so much, Holly, and definitely also an open book, but probably not as interesting as Ryan at all. But my name is Aideen McCarthy. I'm a senior program delivery specialist with our learning and organizational effectiveness team here in Cloudera. I've over 10 years experience in the HR space, the majority of that which sits in the talent acquisition side of things. But I'm really, really passionate about learning and development. So I was really delighted to get the opportunity to move into that space internally about a year ago. I absolutely love being able to help people, so to problem solve, to grow within themselves and to grow within their career. I'm also an absolute advocate for creating a workplace culture that is based on inclusion and belonging for absolutely everyone. I'm a very proud Corkonian and a very proud Clouderan, and it's been a real privilege to be a part of the Cloudera growth story here in Cork over the last 6 years. So very excited to be here today to share my thoughts, and thanks so much for having me.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Aideen. So to start the panel discussion then, we might stick with you. What simple tips would you offer for attracting a diverse workforce? And, why should we care? Why is it important?
Yeah, absolutely. Great question. So I suppose to start, it is absolutely essential for us to have diverse teams to innovate and to thrive and to grow. And one of the crucial first touch points any prospective candidate has is looking at the job descriptions. So being incredibly intentional at this stage is really essential to not only attracting a very diverse workforce, but also getting them to follow through on their application. So doing things like removing any unnecessarily buzzy and vague language and focusing on the competencies, the skill sets that are really crucial to the day-to-day success of the role. Not just listing absolutely everything under the sun. We'd all love a unicorn, but it's not always possible. And I suppose also removing any of the irrelevant barriers. So like requiring a university degree or specific certifications where, your comparable or your transferable skill sets can be acquired in other ways, where money or where access to may not be as large a barrier for some. So internally in Cloudera as well, here we actively set a very consistent global standard through our interviewing excellence certification. So it's a course that we run internally for all of our managers and all of our interviewing panelists to go through to ensure that hiring decisions are being made without biases. And we are also then creating a really wonderful candidate experience from the get-go for everyone.
Brilliant. Thank you, Aideen. And Paddy, we might go to you next and get your angle then from a recruiting perspective.
Yeah, thanks, Holly. Well, it's good to see that Aideen is also on the talent acquisition side, because I think a lot of the pointers that she made there, I pretty much had them nailed as well. But look, I suppose just to follow on from that, I think it's very important, and I agree with Aideen that you need to certainly craft inclusive job postings, right? And you need to be removing any hidden bias from your job specifications. And from my own experience, job specs tend to be the least looked at factor within the whole recruitment process, right? They're very often, gathering dust in someone's folder on their desktop, and then they're kind of resurrected and just posted out willy-nilly without necessarily, I suppose, reviewing them to see if there's unconscious bias in it. Are they tailored to actually reach the target audience that you're looking for? And certain small things like taking out, I suppose, overtly masculine terms, maybe using some online platforms to actually remove hidden bias, I think is very, very important. Simple steps like taking out years of experience can certainly be beneficial with regards to attracting a larger female cohort. And, I would say probably utilizing, communities that maybe promote diversity as a way of posting your jobs on their platforms, and maybe actively going and engaging with third level institutions that would certainly promote diversity. And I think one other important thing is that you can actually very much do blind hiring. So, you know, when you do push the job specification out there and you get internal applications, you can use various different tools to actually take out any identifying information, name, gender identity, et cetera, and take that blind hiring approach. I know for a fact that certainly some organizations that we work with, certainly in the US, have adopted that blind hiring policy as a way of identifying other diverse talent within their applicant group.
Great, that's so interesting, Paddy. Thank you. And it is so true. You know, a job description is a candidate's first insight into your organization and can actually offer insight into the culture itself. So important for organizations to get this right and to use inclusive language. So to flip to the other side of the coin then, Ryan, I might go to you next. What does psychological safety mean to you?
Yeah, so I think, Holly, I think you touched on it towards the start, but psychological safety and inclusion, diversity and equity are kind of inherently linked to my mind anyway. It's the whole idea of being able to be your true self and be able to bring yourself to work, really, I suppose, in a workplace setting. Yeah, I think, you know, again, for me, with my background and my past, I think being able to feel like I can be open and honest about my feelings and my emotions on certain days and how I am is really important. I think VMware's kind of struck a good balance with that. I feel like, you know, through the grad program, I've had 3 different managers, and disclosure, especially with regards to disability, is always an issue. You know, mentioning having the tough conversation, I suppose. And as I went on, it's got a lot easier, and I feel like I've never had a bad, you know, experience of being honest with my managers. And I still go to, you know, therapy once a month, and that's just a given now as part of my routine, which is, you know, beautiful. It makes me feel quite safe in the role because, you know, it's not a massive issue. I think had I had a bad experience where I say, look, I've got to go for, you know, therapy once a month, and someone turns around to me and says, no, you can't, you've got to keep working or do it on your off hours, that would be a massive shock to me. And I think, you know, that would be a cultural clash, I suppose. So it's nice that I have that kind of safety net, really. And I think VMware's just good with that. In like, and again, I don't think I'd be here today if it wasn't a supportive culture and a supportive company, really. I don't think they'd give me time off to speak about this. And yeah, it's just, I suppose, what it really means to me is just being safe and comfortable in a place that I spent quite a lot of my life anyway, I suppose.
Yeah, okay, great. Thanks again for being so open. And it is so true. I think, you know, transparent communication is a tool we should all use when building relationships of trust. And I believe that people are inherently good. It's the same case for most leaders. They typically want to do right by their people. So we should all really be encouraged to kind of put your hand up and ask for help and support when needed. Aideen, I might jump to you next. Do you have anything to add there?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved the analogy Ryan used there of the safety net. I think that's first and foremost so important that you do feel safe in wherever you are, in whatever workplace you are in. And I suppose for me, psychological safety, you know, is the opportunity for me to be myself, my completely holistically authentic self. And like, I'm not expected to be perfect. It's totally okay if I make a mistake. I won't be given out to, I won't be reprimanded. It doesn't reflect on me and my competencies, but instead I can use it then as like a learning or a growth opportunity for me to maybe do better in the future. I suppose it also means being able to have that open dialogue across the board where I can add new ideas or processes and it won't be shut down. It's definitely, I suppose, for me, an environment where I'm inspired to contribute and really feel valued. And I think that goes back to that safety net that Ryan mentioned as well. Like, if you work in a company where, you know, you're offered that safety net, it makes you so much more open. It makes you really feel valued. It makes you really feel safe. I think that is the main point of, you know, having psychological safety in a workplace.
Yeah, perfect. I know that you touched on the importance of learning and growth there, which is hugely important because I think, you know, one of the most commonly noted comments when people leave an organization is, well, I just didn't see the opportunities there. So it's really important for organizations to be given opportunities to the entire employee force and kind of removing bias from processes like career progression and ensuring that everyone has the opportunity to grow and develop.
Yeah.
Paddy, Yeah, thanks. Paddy, I might jump to you next. Can you hear me? Oh, you're on mute there.
Sorry, I'm on mute. Apologies.
No
Yeah,
worries.
so look, I think I agree wholeheartedly with everything that's been said. You know, when I come into the office here, there's a sign that hits me straight away: is to bring your whole authentic self to work. And you know, that has resonated very, very strongly with me. And I feel that, you know, when you can be honest, when you can be open, you know, when you can voice your concerns, your opinions without fear of retribution or being marginalized, it's so powerful, right? And ultimately, then there's that level of freedom and what Ryan said, the safety net leads, I think, you know, to honest opinions, creativity, ideas, which ultimately can, you know, can only add value to an organization and bring it on to further success. So, you know, I suppose that's my add-on to it. I agree with what everyone has said here, but certainly I think it's a powerful thing if we can create that psychological safety in work, and ultimately it's going to lead to a better work environment for everybody.
Yeah, completely agree. So it might be easier said than done, but Ryan, how can we create a sense of psychological safety in the workplace?
Yeah, I'll try my best to give some tips. Like you said, it is easier said than done, and obviously with the Tech Industry Alliance, there's a broad range of companies and sizes and stuff like that, which I think is important for us to keep in mind as well. Inclusion diversity tends to maybe, well, not tends to, but I think it's maybe easier in a bigger company where you've got more resources, more time, more people with maybe passion to drive these kind of things. It might be extra to the day-to-day running of the business, but I think there's a lot of different things we can do to improve psychological safety, and one, again, for me, I've got good experiences of managers and stuff, but having specific manager training is always important. I know there's a lot of different companies in Cork and Kerry that are doing disability awareness support training, and there's also support schemes for management funded by the government and stuff, which is always good to kind of get that level of understanding when we're talking about kind of invisible disabilities and stuff like that. As well as that, I think there's a few different things that VMware do well that lead to the increase of psychological safety, at least for me. So one thing we have is take a break days. So there are 4 kind of additional paid days off a year. Some companies might call them mental health break or mental health days and stuff, but the whole premise is they're kind of no question asked days that you can just take off if you feel like you need it. I don't think you need a diagnosed mental health issue to have days where you just feel a little bit overwhelmed or you're a little bit too tired and there's something going on outside of work that you need to take that break. So they're really important. And again, even if you never use it, the fact that they're there in the back of your mind to think, okay, look, there's a resource there and the company cares enough about my personal well-being to allow me to take this break, I think is really important. And I think, again, speaking to a few different companies in the same region, I think we owe it to each other to try create positive experiences for our employees, because the more one company does it, and that, say if we've got people bouncing from company to company, the more you feel comfortable and the more that kind of culture gets created in a variety of different ways. Like I feel like if I went to a different company now, I'd feel comfortable with disclosing my issues, and that would again create a kind of a culture of being more open, and the more we do that, I think the better it is for candidates, but the companies themselves as well. It kind of fosters that culture of psychological safety. I hope that touched on the point. There's a few ideas there, but yeah.
Definitely, those days sound fab. I'm very jealous. Another thing we have in Deloitte that works really well are the employee resource groups, and they benefit because they kind of shining light on visibility on underrepresented groups. And I think aside from putting money on the table, people work because they want to feel as though they're part of something bigger than themselves. They want their work to impact the organization and the people around them, and they want to feel included. So yeah, completely agree there. Paddy, I might jump to you next.
Yeah, I mean, for me as a leader within Star Circle, I feel that you need to lead by example, right? And you need to, be showing that level of respect and inclusiveness, and act as that role model for other members in your team, as how one needs to act, right? And by doing that, you create that environment of respect and inclusiveness. And I would also add as well that you need to be setting clear expectations in terms of what the right behaviors are, what the right attitudes are, and the culture that you expect within your team or within your organization, right? I think the onus is on those in leadership roles to really set the tone and the standard to which the culture in the organization should be, right? And I think then ultimately it's a continual reinforcement, be that through training, be that through workshops, and bringing external experts in to talk about psychological safety, obviously, but creating that diverse and inclusive workforce so that everyone can actually, number one, be attracted to the organization, and number two, work effectively, efficiently, and happy within an organization.
Yeah, it is so true what you were saying there. And I think oftentimes diversity and inclusion is seen as a HR issue, which is just not the solution at all. And I think in order to have a strong culture regarding diversity, equity, and inclusion, it needs to be owned and driven by all. And exactly what you said, it needs to start from the top, C-suite, or even board level down, and should be kind of owned by the entire org. Aideen, I'm going to jump back to yourself. Do you have anything to add here?
Yeah, no worries at all. Totally agree. Like, I do think there's an onus on absolutely everybody to, bring a psychologically safe workplace. But it does definitely start with leadership, and, leaders modeling the way, demonstrating growth, demonstrating openness and vulnerability in their day-to-day interactions with their teams and beyond is so important. Like then as well, if you're looking at like enabling and validating people who've like a growth mindset, celebrating mistakes, it's totally okay to fail, totally okay to do something wrong, and always, as I mentioned earlier, encouraging kind of that constant learning. I think it also means enabling people with like daily micro affirmations. It's okay to give people compliments. I think people sometimes, especially in Ireland, we shy away from that a lot, and do celebrate the uniqueness that each person can bring to a space, and don't belittle them or other them for, having a difference. But I suppose use that difference then to enhance the team a little bit. Obviously, having enablement tools as well, I think, is quite important. So someone may want to create a psychologically safe space, but may not know where to start. So creating resources, creating trainings in kind of low risk environments for people to be able to explore, to be able to kind of dip their toe in and learn is a really key way to create that sustainability on that front. And I suppose here in Cloudera, we have inclusive leadership series for our people managers, and we have an allyship in action series for our individual contributors, among a plethora of other learning resources and trainings developed by our DE&I and our L&OE teams. So it's very important to kind of give that constant learning as well to allow people to create that safe space.
Yeah, brilliant. I noticed you touched on your allyship programs that you have in Coursera. Would you tell us a little bit more about that, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So I suppose Cloudera has been really intentional about making really meaningful strides towards creating a much more inclusive workplace. And our allyship course was created to help increase people's awareness of factors that contribute to, but also detract from an inclusive culture, and how to more effectively show up as an ally rather than just be a bystander. So in the course, we really dive into like understanding the difference between intent and impact. And we also aim to increase people's awareness to identify microaggressions and inequities and how to then mitigate those. And we also then walk some people through how to identify individual key actions to show up as an ally. It's something I'm personally very passionate about, and I do think it's up to people who hold positions of privilege to be active allies to those with less access, and to really take responsibility for changes that will help others to be successful. And I suppose active allies really utilize their credibility to create a much more inclusive workplace where every single individual can thrive and can find ways to make their privilege then work for other people. And wielding privilege as an ally doesn't have to be hard. I've seen allies at all levels take action with really simple everyday efforts that have really made a difference.
Great, thank you. They sound like they're really impactful.
Yeah, no, this is a great course.
Brilliant. Okay, so to move the topic on now to, a discussion around targets and metrics or goals. It's often a controversial conversation. I myself have been a little bit wary in the past over, quotas or targets, purely because I think it's almost like putting a plaster on a big open gushing wound, and that you're not really getting to the root cause of the issue. And then, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I was actually at an International Women's Day event, and the speaker said that the world is not on track to achieve gender equality until the year 2030, which is actually really poor and shocking. So then it kind of brings up this whole argument of, what gets measured gets done. So I can see strengths of the two sides of the argument. But on that note, Paddy, what steps can organizations take to ensure that they are meeting their D&I targets?
I note your stat there that you gave with regards to 2030. I was doing a small bit of reading last night, and they're actually pushing it out a further 10 years, other reports as well. So, it's not good. It's not good reading either way you look at it, right? But maybe just to follow on from what I outlined earlier with regards to leadership, I think, we're redefining our core competencies in here in our organization at the moment, right? And we're actually putting in inclusive leadership as a core competency that is specified in job descriptions, right? And these are going to be, managed and assessed within performance reviews, right? And essentially they need to be role modeled then by the various managers and leaders within the organization. And obviously, to reinforcing that and going back on a point that I made earlier is that you do need to be looking at providing ongoing diversity and inclusion training, right? If I look at what we've done, right, in the recent past, we've had workshops that have been delivered by Belong To, which is an LGBT youth organization, and they very much provide corporate training on inclusive workplaces. And as well as that, then we had an autism consultant that came in as well that conducted a workshop on neurodiversity in the workplace as well. So all this sort of training and all these various initiatives around, D&I, brings it front and center in terms of, all the individuals within our organization in terms of how they need to act and how they need to model their own behaviors to ensure that this is a diverse and inclusive workplace, right? And, to be fair, I've sat in, as you've gone to conferences as well, I've gone to many conferences on the whole D&I side of things, and very often they're delivered by, the talks are delivered by individuals who are working in large organizations. And very often a question comes from the floor, well, I'm an SME, I don't have a budget, and I don't have, but ultimately a lot of these things don't necessarily need budget, they just need focus, and they just need a bit of time, and they just need someone internally to take a leading role in promoting it, right? And one small thing, which I think obviously COVID and the whole world work, that has changed since then is flexible work arrangements. I think that's had a huge measurable impact in terms of, bringing more female representation into the workplace, being more flexible in terms of time, but also the neurodiverse element as well, that, individuals now feel, I suppose they feel safe in the fact that they can actually now work at home full time. They can work with their cameras off when they're talking to their teammates on calls. So all these various initiatives, I think, are very achievable and doable, no matter what size of an organization you are.
Brilliant. It's great to get your perspective on that, Paddy. And I think oftentimes it's not a requirement of budget to improve D&I in your organization. It's a requirement of time, as you said. So yeah, great to get your perspective on that. Aideen, could I move to yourself next, please?
Yeah, absolutely. I suppose I totally get, like, everyone, even on the call here, they're coming from different size organizations, they're coming from different size budgets, but you are so right, Holly, there are such small, easy things that people can do, to start on their journey. And I suppose, I think with organizing, or trying to hit your DE&I targets, I suppose one thing to put these ideas out there and put these targets out there. The ideas and the concepts, they are obviously important, but don't just leave it as lip service. It's definitely another thing to actually action on them and create accountability. I do feel sometimes hard and fast metrics can sometimes be more of a hindrance than a help. It does become a little bit of a numbers game, but there is a place for metrics as well. And if you are going to create them, what I would say is create them around accountability that leaderships will hold themselves to and others to, and follow through then on the reporting and the updates of that. I think transparency is really key as well. So really communicating the goals, the progress that you're making with a large organization, so like ourselves, and even beyond, is even more important in my eyes. I think like as a company, we're very proud of what we have achieved, but we're by no means there. I think there's always more that can be done, and we just want to keep pushing the needle consistently and continuously to really grow an environment that will always be inclusive and always build belonging. So really small things, like Paddy said there, like just having more flexible work environments. We have unplugged days, which are similar to the days Ryan spoke about at the start as well, where the whole company is off together. So it gives people that flexibility. We're absolutely a family first company as well. We redid our code back during COVID, and I think something small like that, where a company where individuals know that the company is there to support them, is so important. And just simple tips like, share your pronouns, or I don't know, we use Slack internally here, and Slack now has a facility where you can put in the pronunciation of your name, which I think, if you're dealing with, different regions, different countries, I think it's very important to be able to acknowledge someone and make sure you're saying their name correctly. So having that as a really small tip, I think, is very important.
Thank you, Aideen. And yeah, it can become almost like a numbers game. And it's so important to remember that diversity is absolutely nothing without inclusion. And oftentimes we have seen organizations, unfortunately, focus solely on diversity. And then, what's more than likely going to happen there is you end up having this revolving door of people coming into the company but leaving because they don't feel heard, they don't feel a sense of belonging, they don't feel included, which is obviously the last thing, any human wants, not mind an entire organization. So yeah, great to get your perspective there. Ryan, do you have anything to add there around steps organizations can take in achieving their targets?
Yeah. So, I think one thing both Paddy and Aideen said and fully rings true to me is the whole idea of flexibility anyway, for sure. I think now more than ever, we've seen that it works. Flexible workplace, work from home and stuff like that. And especially, for people with, like Paddy said, kind of neurodiversity issues or, again, myself, mental health issues, work from home sometimes just works a lot better, and the flexibility to pick and choose the days that you go into the office and you don't are perfect. So someone who's neurodiverse might work way better from home because they can control the whole environment around them. They can, decide what lights they have in their room, decide what sounds are going on around them. And it's a much better environment. For myself, I'm kind of someone who feels different day to day. And there's some mornings I wake up and I just can't face the office, and legitimately had that yesterday. I was supposed to go in for a in-person event and had a bad night's sleep Tuesday night, was feeling anxious the whole day for whatever reason, and got to make that decision on my own yesterday morning that I'll leave it off. And I sent an email to people I was supposed to be doing something with, and they were all just supportive. Said, look, take care, take a break, you're fine, which is perfect. So flexibility is great. And I think, we don't have mandated days that we have to come into the office. Like, the office is there any day you want, you book a table. I feel like if I was, told I had to come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, I have difficulty with that, just because, again, I'm quite, dependent on how I feel when I wake up. One thing I feel any company can do to meet their diversity targets as well is working with the local colleges. So UCC, MTU, I think both have great disability support services. I'm a child of the UCC DSS. I got my started my career through an internship with the DSS in Apple for 3 months, and without that, I don't think I would be here today. I don't think I'd be in my career. It's a massive. It was a massive launchpad for myself personally, and I think there's fantastic people enrolled in those services that maybe have barriers to getting into employment that maybe wouldn't ever get into employment if they didn't have those services. So I think working with those the DSS and UCC and MTU's services as well would be fantastic, and it helps to kind of get these people a start in their career, and also you get an incredible employee at the same time. It works both ways, I think. And then I was kind of touching on it earlier too, but there's plenty of government grant schemes for, again, the small and medium, more so than maybe the larger companies, but, you know, disability sensitivity training, disability awareness support grants to retain employees that acquire disabilities, disability wage subsidy schemes as well. All of these kind of take the quote unquote risk from an employer when, you know, taking on someone with a disability or anything like that. So it can make I suppose inclusion diversity accessible to all size companies too, which I think is important. But yeah, no, I think there's plenty companies can do, and I think it is just a matter of putting focus and energy towards it. Like everyone has said, really, it is achievable. It's just a matter of focusing on it.
Yeah, brilliant. And I think those programs are fantastic because they've opened the door to so many people who might not have considered a job in the professional world before. So opening that door is so inclusive, and I think it's brilliant. And also what you touched on around the hybrid working model, I think it's one benefit we can thank from the pandemic. So it's definitely great to see so many organizations offering it. We have it, a flexible working model in Deloitte as well, and it works so well. And we've had so many new people join as well that might not have typically taken a job up in Deloitte because we previously were going in, you know, Monday to Friday, and it just doesn't suit a whole lot of people. So casting that recruitment net a little bit wider is always fantastic. So thanks for your perspective there, Ryan. So before I finish the panel discussion, I have one more question, but I just want to encourage the participants to use the chat function. If you have any questions you would like to ask the panelists, please feel free to do so, and we will finish with those questions that come through. So one more question on my side. We might end with some practical tips. And Aideen, if we could start with yourself, what action would you recommend people or organizations take today?
Yeah. Great question. And I suppose, as we've mentioned, you know, time and time again throughout the webinar today, companies come in all shapes and sizes, you know, everyone's on different journeys, everyone's on different paths. So I think it's really important for each company to identify where they are in their journey. It is absolutely a process, and you can't like jump right to a solution or an end goal without doing the necessary personal and organizational work to really get there. I suppose the goal is not to have this culture be a fad, but be a really sustainable part of your institution and your life. So what I would say is start learning. So the history, the laws, the systems that are in place that are currently holding people back from creating equity and inclusion for absolutely everyone, regardless of their identity. I think our systems and our institutions still are steeped in systemic biases and barriers. And so learning about them is, for me, the first step to dismantling them.
Great, thank you. I think sustainability is so important in any strategy, so completely agree there. Paddy, Ryan?
Yeah, I think you need to be intentional about diversity. Again, I'm gonna hang my hat again on this leadership thing, but you just need to state it, that you want to be, you know, that you're looking to create a diverse and inclusive workforce, right? You know, and I think that needs, we spoke about at the start of the webinar with regards to what you need to do to attract, and I think it starts with your recruitment efforts. So just making your job specifications free from bias, have an open and inclusive process around the interviewing, have a diverse interview panel, facilitate those coming from neurodiverse backgrounds by having a very clear and streamlined interview process, provide as much information as you can with regards to what the interviews are going to involve, so that people are prepared in advance, those that may suffer from anxiety or else or whatnot, that, you know, that people are comfortable coming in and engaging. And ultimately then I think the key thing is that communication. So constantly be communicating, constantly reinforcing that open communication is safe within your organization. And ultimately, I think that they're all key things that can, you know, that will facilitate a diverse and inclusive environment.
Yeah, I totally agree, and all fantastic ideas there, Paddy. So thank you. Ryan, do you have any tips or tricks to share with the group?
Yeah, I suppose let's start off first off by saying, I mean, well done for everyone for joining today. I think even being part of this and being in attendance is huge for promoting inclusion and diversity in the workplace. Just having any kind of interest at all, I think, is really impressive. In terms of tips, Paddy touched on it there with regards to, you know, giving plenty of information to candidates throughout the process. So again, you know, neurodiverse people might not necessarily be good with, I'm blanking now, but different tasks or tests in the interview process. So knowing what's coming definitely is important for that. And obviously, you know, well, I think historically the way people would get around that is give them an extra 30 minutes on an aptitude test or whatever, which doesn't necessarily work for people that might have dyslexia or neurodiverse. They might just not be able to do it at all. And that's it. But yeah, and to Aideen's point, I think just doing your research, I mean, it's less than Aideen what you were saying, but I was just going to suggest Googling, you know, invisible disabilities. Again, the majority of disabilities are invisible. People don't really know about it. I'm, you know, involved with the Disability Wellness Pillar and work, and I'm ignorant on a lot of disabilities, you know, so it's just a matter of educating yourself. And I think being very self-critical about how the company is doing in this inclusion diversity space. You know, you could run one event and think, okay, I'm doing really well, but you know, looking at your numbers, looking at how much you're doing for local community, even or how you're, you know, reaching various different kind of underrepresented groups, is really important. And yeah, I think just being critical, but also, you know, pat yourself on the back when you are doing somewhat well as well, I think. Rambling now a little bit, but I'll pass it back over to you, Holly, I think.
Thanks, Ryan, for that. So I just had a look at the Q&As, and we have a few questions coming through. So I'll just open up to the panel, and feel free to jump and answer whichever one you'd like to. So just to read the first one come through. Hi all, thank you for a really informative session. My question is around job specs. They frequently have years experience required and a master's. I don't think it's necessary for a lot of our job specs. What should I include instead to get good candidates that haven't come to industry in a traditional way?
What about putting down key objectives as opposed to skill sets? So being upfront in your job specification with regards to what you want the successful candidate to be able to do on a day-to-day and what are the end result of their efforts. And I think that, you know, once you put that front and center in terms of your expectation for the individual in the role and carry out the interview process along those lines, then I think that will be able to determine far better the type of candidate that you're looking for, as opposed to aligning it with regards to skills or years of experience.
Yeah, totally agree there, Paddy. Ryan, a question has come for you now around, from your experience, have you any advice for employees who might suffer with mental health issues on how to open up about them in a work context? Must have been a tough thing to do, so well done.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yeah, I mean, it wasn't easy for me at all, to be honest, and it was kind of a matter of, I don't know, I mean, like the first time I ever say disclosed was actually in a presentation at the end of my 3-month internship in Apple, and it was easier because I came in through the DSS and UCC, so the context was kind of relevant, and I gained a lot of kind of very positive experience from that. Stuff like eating with people, which you wouldn't really think about, but going for breakfast and lunch with people in the workplace setting helped me a lot with my issues. Tips, it's a hard one to do, and it sounds, you know, easy, and I know it's not, but just allowing yourself to be vulnerable, I think, is a big thing. You know, if you have a good relationship with your manager, being able to say, look, I'm having a bad week, I'm having a bad day, and then given the context, is always quite easy. Again, I found it to be very difficult the first time, but as you do it more and more, it becomes a lot easier, and I can promise you that. Yeah, I'm coming from a weird place now because I'm doing stuff like this, and some of my friends didn't even know I had issues up until a couple of years ago, and found out through videos with UCC and stuff. So I'm almost gone off the other end and too open about it. But generally, I don't think it's anything to be afraid of. I think nowadays, especially after COVID, people have had, or I suppose our mental health has taken a massive hit. Whether we're saying it or not, we're all going through something. Everyone has, it's what people say, but everyone has mental health. It doesn't matter whether it's good or bad, but everyone has some form of mental health, just on a scale as well. So, just allowing yourself to be vulnerable, I think, is the main thing, really, for me anyway. Yeah.
Great, thanks, Ryan. And I think what you're doing in speaking so openly and honestly is so encouraging to other people. And you probably don't even realize it, but I know from listening, even to you speaking today in today's session, it is so encouraging to kind of be open and honest, because what you've been saying has been so impactful, and I would 100% believe that it would affect loads of other people, encourage them to come forward. So thank you for being so open.
Oh, thank you.
No problem. So a really valid question has come through around, innovation and creativity. So psychological safety plays an important role in both innovation and creativity, and people come up with so much more creative and ambitious ideas if they feel safe to fail. Would you agree?
I'm happy to jump in here and absolutely, completely agree with that. I think it's really important to, for me anyway, normalizing, being able to fail, normalizing even the I don't know, like being willing to say that. And like, from, if you're someone who starts off, sharing that you don't know something in a team meeting, you will totally allow others feel safe to say the same thing. And, sharing examples then where you made mistakes, where you learned from those mistakes, and demonstrating that learning is part of the job is so important. Like, no one's static in their career. Everyone always wants to learn to improve in their career. And it's the exact same when it comes to psychological safety. Learning from the past is so important. I think as well, like the last couple of years, the pandemic and everything has definitely been a crash course in vulnerability for everyone. And we learned to navigate like that constant change, staffing concerns, and everyone was making mistakes left, right, and center. And I think, as a company or as a team, I think being able to discuss what we learned during that time is really important, and maybe is a nice way to start the conversation, to allow your team know that it's a safe place for you to speak and be open, and then they can feel like they're comfortable to fail, and they're can learn from that as well.
Yeah, totally agree with you there, Aideen. So a question has come through around barriers. So what are the key barriers to achieving diversity and inclusion efforts in your organization currently?
Barriers, I don't know what I use the term barriers, but I think, just going back to my earlier point, I don't think necessarily budget should be used as a barrier. I think it's time and focus, right? And you need some individuals within your organization to take and run with it, right? But also have the open communication and honest feedback, that that you can promote these initiatives without fear or rancor, right? And that you can take it and run with it. But I know I spoke earlier in the talk with regards to we're currently working on competency models within our organization here, and there's a huge amount of time and effort that's being put into it. But I think we set the parameters early with regards to what we were trying to do, and we've got huge buy-in from the teams with regards to the initiative. And ultimately, it's going to be for our benefit, because it's going to create a more diverse and inclusive environment. I would say an even more diverse and inclusive environment than this organization already is. And to the earlier question around psychological safety and creative work environments, an open and creative work environment that allows feedback, open and honest feedback, has an environment whereby people can make mistakes and learn from it. That's only going to do any business or any organization good. And ultimately, a better work environment is going to lead to a happier, more productive environment, and ultimately, it's better for the business.
Yeah, I completely agree there as well. And I know just from kind of studying diversity and inclusion as a discipline, one of the main barriers is bias. And unfortunately, we all actually have bias. It's just about recognizing what your bias is, what your triggers are for that bias, and then putting plans in place to mitigate against the risk of that bias. We can get rid of it. You just have to recognize everyone has it. That's why things like, you know, bias training are so impactful for organizations. So yeah, another one to note.
Completely agree. Just add a point on that one, Holly, if you don't mind. I think bias is one really, really easy way. I think allowing people to understand their biases, and there are so many different biases that some of us aren't even aware of. Like, so you've got your like affinity biases where you're nearly favoring people who are similar to yourselves, which puts up a huge barrier when you've got interviewing panels who are, you know, all the same type of person coming from the same kind of background, the same type of university. So like breaking that down and looking at like something simple like your interview panel when you're bringing new candidates into the process, and allowing people to be aware of the biases that are out there that they may not know that, you know, is inherently built into them is so important.
Yeah, completely. Another one as well, another trigger I know for a lot of people is time. If you're under time constraint, you're going to go to the person who you know the best and say, oh look, I know they can do this in to a high quality and to, you know, within the time constraints. I'm just going to go to them, as opposed to maybe working with someone you haven't worked before and offering them the chance. So yeah, triggers are a big one to be aware of. A question has come through around what are or how detrimental are the effects of isolation in the workplace? If anyone wants to take that one.
Well, I can take it if no one else wants to, but again, yeah, my personal experience, I would have been naturally, I suppose, a bit of a recluse anyway, you know, going through issues and locking myself away and stuff. So COVID was easy for me. I had been on lockdown for a few years before that anyway, which is grand. But yeah, no, I think since getting back into the office, I can feel that I'm much more productive, but also much more happier in myself and feel more confident, you know, getting in regularly and routinely, just seeing the same faces, and work itself is a lot easier. You can pop over to someone's desk and ask a question. But like that now, I mean, there's some days where I just can't bring myself to do it, but I generally do feel like the days I can't, I feel worse in myself then too, because I'm at home and I'm on my own and questions are harder to ask, and I feel like I'm missing out on some of the fun in the office as well. I think VMware and DMT, my team, generally are just lovely people. They're lovely to be around, which is a great thing to be able to say about your colleagues. And yeah, I mean, isolation is definitely difficult, and productivity goes down the toilet too, I think, when you're, you know, on your own a lot. And again, you know, when I go through patches of maybe being a little bit depressed, I end up going for naps during my lunch break and stuff like that too, which is good for no one, and I wake up feeling groggy and terrible. So yeah, no, I think it's important to get back into the office if you can, and if your company allows it. Again, there are some people that just work better from home, and that's perfectly fine too. Teach their own, I suppose, and as long as, you know, you can continue to work and you're happy in yourself doing that, that's perfectly fine. But yeah, isolation is a negative for me for the most part anyway.
Yeah, I think it was that human connection that we were all craving when the pandemic restrictions were at their height, and it really kind of shone a light on how much you need that. But yeah, thanks Ryan for that insight. So there are no more questions coming through on the Q&A, but I would like to first of all thank the panelists. Thank you so much for your honesty, for your insight. I think that was a great conversation. I'd also like to thank the attendees. You took an hour out of your lunch break on a Thursday, so much appreciated for that. Hope you all enjoyed, and thank you so much for joining.
Thanks everyone.
Take care.
Thank you.
All the best.
Bye-bye.
Okay.